What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
So welcome to our show. It is Monday, February 20th, 2017, and we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room twiddling the dials and keeping us out of trouble. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. First of all, it is President's Day, and this is the day when Donald Trump walks out of the White House, and if he sees his shadow, we get 6 more weeks of the media snowstorm all over us to have to deal with. And it really is getting rather intense out there. It's almost like the corporate media doesn't even really care that they're being constantly caught out and exposed in the independent media. It's just all about trying to convince that portion of America that cannot use a computer that Trump is bad and the deep state is good and all the rest of it here. All righty. Now, interestingly enough, both the CIA and the FBI have now gone public saying that all of this claim in the corporate media that Trump is linked to Russia, that Russia's supporting him, that he's a Manchurian candidate, in this case a Moscow candidate, they've declared it complete garbage, grossly overstated, which is no surprise because we know that's what the corporate media's job is, to lie to you. And one of the problems that we're dealing with right now is just the corporate media is out there throwing so much junk out there, hoping something's going to stick. And we need to be very, very, very careful. At this point, the best rule of thumb regarding Donald Trump is to go to his Twitter feed and go to his videos and do not even consider any kind of secondary sourcing through the corporate media because it's all complete nonsense and junk. Now, they're still out there screaming about Donald Trump and Russia, and they're still out there saying Michael Flynn was a traitor for talking about sanctions with the UN Russian ambassador. But WikiLeaks has already come on out saying the Clinton campaign had a private off-the-record get-together with Chinese government officials during her campaign. So if it was wrong for Michael Flynn to be talking business after the election was over and he was part of the transition team, certainly it's a far worse crime for Hillary Clinton to be coordinating with a foreign government before the election had even happened. And remember, the Clintons' connections to the Chinese go back a long, long way, certainly to the Chinagate scandal, which is when Bill Clinton was running for re-election and he used his authority as president to authorize the sale to China of highly sensitive technology over the objection of the intelligence community and the Defense Department. And at the same time, Chinese money was pouring into his re-election campaign, was funneled through Chinese-American citizens to nominally make it legal, but it turned out the money was originating with Chinese business interests and the Chinese intelligence as well. And there was supposed to be an investigation about that, but gosh darn, the White House email server crashed, and we stopped bothering with the backups months ago, so that investigation is dead in the water here. Now, at this particular point, they've identified one of the leakers in the White House who are taking early drafts of material and sending it to the media so the media can attack it before the policy's even been firmed up. And apparently it turned out it was Katie Walsh, who is part of the Never Trump Republican movement, or was part of it. And what we're seeing here is a war between the intelligence community and the president. It's not the first time that we have seen that. And as a matter of fact, we certainly saw it with John F. Kennedy. We saw it with Eisenhower. And the intelligence community do not want presidents with independent ideas. They feel they should be running the country. And, of course, that is certainly not in the Constitution at all. All right, so let's grab a couple of phone calls here. Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Bob?
Hi, Mike.
There you are.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. I'm furious. I am furious. I want to speak about something that you spoke about before the election, before election day, that's still relevant today. I'm paying federal taxes to an illegitimate government. I'm paying federal taxes to a deep state, a shadow government that is promoting policies that Trump did not run on during the campaign. Completely antithetical to what Trump ran on.
Yes.
You've got the situation in Syria, four Russian soldiers killed, thanks to whatever, an IED, compliments of the Saudis, the Qataris, or the Turks, or the CIA. So they're not going to give up on Syria, Trump or no Trump. You've got the massing of troops on Russia's border continuing. You've got further provocations in the South China Sea. I didn't vote for this, and a lot of other Americans didn't vote for this.
No, we
I shouldn't
didn't.
have to pay federal taxes. I shouldn't pay federal taxes to these people.
Well, I mean,
this is outrageous.
There have been tax protest movements that have originated before. Certainly during Vietnam was a massive tax protest movement. A lot of Americans never filed their paperwork, never paid their taxes. And even without getting into the international scene here, I mean, look what's going on out in California, where their infrastructure is clearly broken down and failing. And we have a government that is taking your money with promises that they're going to take care of you with that money, and instead the money goes to the war machine, it goes to Israel, goes to the military-industrial complex, goes to big pharma, it's going to the refugees and the illegal immigrants, and very clearly we have a government that sees the American people as nothing more than a bunch of walking wallets.
Absolutely. We've got airports that are third world airports. I mean, I travel a lot. I travel over the world in Dubai, Hong Kong. I see how their infrastructure is, and I see our infrastructure. We've got a war economy. It's laughable. All this money is just going to war. I've
been saying that for years. We're in a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but we're seeing the results all the time. Whether it's Katrina or Deepwater Horizon or the Oroville Dam, our nation has been allowed to crumble from neglect because all of the money is being spent on the war agenda. And when the war is over and we have lost it, we're going to be living in a country that is, in large part, crumbling ruins.
Yeah. Mike, I don't know if you heard about the death of Vitaly Churkin.
Yes, I did.
Russia's ambassador. Okay, yeah.
Boy, but I got to tell you, that Russian government, they certainly seem to be hiring a lot of people in very, very fragile health because they keep just falling on over mysteriously.
I mean, exactly. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but I don't know. I wouldn't put it past them.
Oh, wacky conspiracy theorist, you.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. We're going to switch over to Matt in Colorado. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Matt, are you there?
I have yes. Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. I've got two issues. One, I think, is the most prescient, is that 9/11 is the most relevant subject in politics right now. And the divide and conquer techniques, especially dealing with identity politics, is a distraction from the elephant in the room, which is 9/11 truth. I used to live in Boulder and ride my bicycle next to NIST all the time, and NIST was responsible for the pancake theory. Now, so the architects for Engineers in Truth for 9/11, they're coming out. NIST whistleblowers are coming out, and they're saying, "Look, this whole thing just doesn't work." And I think that should be first and foremost. That should be the only.
Well, I don't know that it should be first and foremost here. I mean, right now the situation is very, very simple. We don't need another government investigation to polish the lies on that, and nobody is listening to the corporate media as they reassure us that the official story about anything is the truth, and we should just allow the corporate media and the government to decide for us what is true. We all know there was something dodgy about 9/11. We certainly all know we were being lied to. We can all agree on that. The next question is, what are we going to do about it? And as we see the deep state, or whoever you want to call it, cranking up the lies again about Assad has a secret torture dungeon, and Iran is going to fire missiles at us, and the rest of it, we just have to reach a point of saying, look, you guys are lying to us. You are full of it. We're not listening to you anymore. And right now, the American people, who are being freed of the domination of corporate media, are now free to sit back and say, okay, I'm going to decide for myself what happened on 9/11. I'm a big boy or a big girl. I can figure it out for myself on the basis of the information that's out there. And nobody should cede to the government the authority to tell you what is true or false. you have a right to claim that authority for yourself, and the government may not take it from you.
Yeah, okay, I completely agree with you on that. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to point that out there. And then the only other second thing I have, and I'll make it quick, is that when Trump did his little Air Force One fly-in in Florida and did a town hall meeting,
yes,
to me that's complete nonsense, because the guy already won the election. He's not talking to Congress. He's talking to a bunch of people in an airplane hangar, and they're not going to vote for him again for another 4 years. He already won the election, and I don't know what he's doing going around grandstanding. And then
you've missed the message. You've missed the message. Donald Trump is bypassing the corporate media to take his message directly to the people. He's talking to the American people because Congress isn't listening to him. And yes, he is already starting to think about how he's going to win re-election in 2020. He's already officially declared as a candidate, which makes certain actions by the corporate media and other politicians are now off limits against the rules. I was concerned about him going on down there because it was going to be an opportunity where somebody could take a shot at him. But I think Trump ought to get on out there and start talking directly to the American people and bypass that corporate media. Donald Trump does not need to be in the White House to do his job, not with the modern global communication system at his command. He can be anywhere and still do his job just fine.
But, okay, so granted, I appreciate that perspective. However, him talking to a bunch of people chanting USA, USA, and holding up Trump signs in an airplane hangar in Florida, how is that furthering his job duties as President of the United States? Couldn't he just be sitting, whether in Trump Tower or in the White House, and just getting shit done? Why does he need to be
you got to watch your language on this radio, okay, because we have on-air affiliates, and by the way, I'm going to do a shout-out to the on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network. We do have to comply with certain requirements of the Federal Communications Commission, because even though the U.S. government is dropping white-hot flaming death on innocent people around the world and torturing people to death to find nuclear weapons that never existed, we are not allowed to say certain words on the radio to prove that we are a just and moral people. Now, getting on back to what you're saying,
well, fair enough.
Trump is using the force of his personality and presence to connect with the people. And had it just been that aircraft hangar, I could see merit in your point of view. But obviously that appearance in the hangar was carried all over streaming media, was all over the Internet, and I think it's very important for Donald Trump to be able to do the job he needs to do. He's got to break free of the filtering that the corporate media and the intelligence community are trying to impose on his communication with the American people. They're trying to filter everything going back and forth. Do you remember Gulliver's Travels? And I don't mean the movie,
no,
which focuses just on Lilliput and Brobdingnag. I'm talking about the original books, because the original book of Gulliver's Travel, it was actually political satire. And one of the lands that Gulliver went to, the ruling elites there were considered so important they didn't even talk for themselves. They had servants who walked around with them who would move their jaws with this little inflatable bladder that they wore by their face. And obviously the reality was the people pushing the bladder were really in control of the country. And so all these bladder pushers who have gotten into these positions of influence and power over the last several president administrations, they're very unhappy that Donald Trump wants to tear that bladder off the side of his face, which is exactly what he was doing in that airport hangar.
Okay, fair enough. And then the last thing that I'll say, and again I'll make this very brief, is that I thought it was inappropriate that he had a preacher coming up, giving the introduction and talking about Jesus Christ, and also having Melania say the Lord's Prayer. It just seems like that's not an appropriate introduction, and it flames the fire of divisiveness between Islam and Christianity, and making it a holy war, and I thought that was inappropriate.
Well,
so that's all I got to say.
All right. Well,
And,
thank you very much for the phone call, Matt. We're going to let you go. My response to that is the First Amendment comment on respecting an institution of religion specifically refers to laws that favor one religion over the other. Now, a campaign rally, press the flesh, town hall, whatever you want to say, does not actually constitute official U.S. government business, and Donald Trump, being a religious man, has a First Amendment right to share that religion with everybody with him. You know, it's kind of odd. Today we're hearing that, oh, you shouldn't be talking about Christ and Jesus because it's going to offend the Muslims. And I remember only a decade ago where it was out there saying, oh, you shouldn't be talking about Jesus and Christianity because it's offending the Jews. Well, again, everybody has a right to their religion, whatever it is. And as a citizen, Donald Trump has a right to his, and so does Melania. Now, that rally was not official government business, or there'd be a valid First Amendment comment. But presidents have their religions, and they do put them on display to the public there. So I don't think there's really an issue. All right, Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. This guy's getting upset over the wrong things. You know what bothers me?
What?
While Donald Trump was giving this great speech in Florida and riling up, getting us deplorables riled up, in a good way, I mean.
Yes.
His vice president is over there in, was it Germany there?
Yes.
Saying how he supports not just NATO, but the EU itself. Trump has made it very clear he doesn't support the EU. He's made it clear he's against globalism. Mm-hmm. He's made it clear he's for people like Nigel Farage in Britain and Marine Le Pen in France, who, by the way, people are not supporting the way they should be doing. And that guy in Holland, what's his name? Geert Wilders or something?
Geert Wilders.
He's made it very clear. And meanwhile, this imbecile is over in Germany, totally contradicting him, including the stuff how Russia should give up back the Crimea and everything like that. Which, of course, there's about as much chance of Russia giving up the Crimea as the United States giving Texas back to Mexico.
Or Israel giving up Palestine. It is, Pence is definitely breaking with the traditional model of a vice president of backing up the chief executive, and there's a couple of possible interpretations for that. One is that Pence is trying to reassure the EU that Donald Trump isn't going to bring the whole system crashing down, or Pence may even be sending a not very subtle message to the deep state that, if something were to happen to Donald Trump, that he is more amenable to their agenda. So it's definitely high stakes. Yeah, it's definitely high stakes poker out there.
By the way, I don't know if you know who Lionel is. You see him all over the YouTube.
Yeah.
I wish you'd have him on your show. He was talking about that. Trump is being used possibly as a stalking horse, and the deep state wants Pence. Now, what Trump should do with Pence right now, if you ask me, is rein him in, kind of like JFK did. I don't want to make too much of a comparison there because hopefully he'll protect himself better than JFK did. Rein him in, do what JFK did basically with LBJ. He didn't like LBJ from the get-go. He didn't want him from the get-go, and he let him, but he gave him too much, and he pretty much didn't let him do anything. Now, Reagan made the mistake with Bush, again, kind of like with LBJ.
Okay, Mark, I'm going to have to put you on hold. Mark, I'm going to have to put you on hold. Do not hang up. I'm going to come right back to this after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Mark in North Carolina, and it is an historical reality that ever since the Constitution was amended to make the president and vice president pair running for a particular party, because the old system had been the winner became the president, the runner-up became the vice president, and that meant they were from opposing political parties, and it caused all kinds of friction. So they changed to the system we have now. But very often presidents get stuck with vice presidents that they really do not like and do not want to have to work with, but it's part of building a coalition to win that nomination. Certainly John F. Kennedy did not like Lyndon Johnson, and in fact, John F. Kennedy planned on dumping Lyndon Johnson as VP during his second term in office. And interestingly enough, Lyndon Johnson found out about that through one of his staffers who was roommates with Mary Jo Kopechne, the lady who died in the back seat of Ted Kennedy's car at Chappaquiddick.
Well, that I didn't know about Mary Jo Kopechne. But the thing about as far as Reagan goes, he actually, he didn't like Bush any more than Kennedy liked Johnson, and yet he let Bush run wild, and Bush tried to assassinate him. There's almost no question about it. You have to be stupid to believe otherwise. I mean, here was Hinckley, the son of a close family friend of the Bushes. There's always coincidences with them, like the Bin Laden family and Boston, Boston in 9/11.
Yeah. I mean, George W. Bush had been business partners with Osama bin Laden's older brother, Salim bin Laden, in a failed energy venture called Arbusto Energy, and then Salim bin Laden died in a small airplane crash, which seems to happen so much in the upper reaches of the American political reality.
Seems par for course, right?
Yes.
If you connect it to the Bushes or Clintons and stuff like that, and there's anything they don't want you to know, you're not going to have very long lifespan, I guess, right?
Yeah, I don't know why they're not all carrying parachutes around with them all the time.
I'm telling you. But as far as Donald Trump goes, you got to be careful. If I was him, I would rein in right now. I would rein in Pence.
Yes.
I would also rehire Flynn. Remember, Flynn is an intelligence expert. He knows what's going on. Okay, that's the kind of man you want on your side, and Flynn is loyal to Trump because Flynn was with Trump from the get-go.
Well, Trump is now encouraging Flynn to try and fight for his honor now that the original stories about connections with Russia have been discredited by both the CIA and FBI. Flynn is now saying he's willing to testify before Congress as to what actually happened in order to get to the bottom of just where this political attack on him came from. So there's a lot of infighting and chaos going on. My concern is that Donald Trump is being so absorbed by all the faction fights in his front lawn that he really isn't paying attention while Pence and McCain and Lindsey Graham are out there still pushing this war agenda.
Another thing what I would do if I was Trump right now is I would arrest the former CIA director, the Wahhabi convert there, Saudi Wahhabi convert, Brennan. I would arrest, I would get rid of Comey once and for all. And I would also arrest the guy who was the head of the DNI. Who was it? What was him, what was that guy's name again? The head of the, one who was supposedly above the CIA.
The Director of National Intelligence.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm blanking on it as well. There's so many names here. Let me step on back here about Director Comey. Now, obviously, I'm no friend of the FBI, especially after the way they were treating me back in 1994. But I think Comey is actually a closet good guy. And the reason I think that goes back to the hearings about Hillary's charges, where Comey admitted on national TV Hillary Clinton had committed all these Title 18 violations, and then he did as he had been ordered to do from above. He said, we are not pressing charges, and Loretta Lynch said, we're not pressing charges, and that was the end of it. Now, if Comey was one of the bad guys, he just would have said, we didn't find anything. And I think Comey is looking for a chance to rehabilitate his historical image. Mark, we're going to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Here we're going to go back to the phones, take a couple more phone calls, then we're going to close the lines and do some news. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Hey, that not the previous caller, but the one before that said, why was Trump in Florida? Trump's in Florida because the media is never going to give him the true, the ability to tell the people.
That's exactly what I was saying. That's exactly what I was saying.
Like, So basically, he's doing the direct-to-mail routine, direct to the consumer. Where the consumer will, that's what we are. Now that we can call our representatives, the senators and the congressmen say, hey, how come you're not supporting Trump? You know, because he's directly given the message, you know, to us instead of going through the media. And the media is still going to report on it. Not all of them, but some of them, you know, will show him at the rally. But that's, you know, that's what's going on. You know, I mean, he's never going to get a fair shake with the media. When are people going to realize that? I mean,
in economics, one of the things that is really a negative is the idea of a so-called middleman. And in one way, it's a way of collating manufactured goods and distributing them. But there are too many people who want to be the middleman and have exclusive control over the flow of any commodity going out to the public, off of which they can profit handsomely without actually adding anything of value. And there are a lot of places in our economy, especially in military procurement, where you've got the person who actually makes the hammer, and then you have a whole string, 10 or 20 middlemen, who are all adding their profit on top of that until it gets to the final consumer, which is why things cost so much. And we have way too many people who want to be middlemen, and way too few who want to be the actual makers of things. And the corporate media has gotten used to the idea of being the middleman between the government and the American people. And like any other middleman who is seeing their monopolistic control over the commodity, in this case information threatened, you know, they're kicking up a fuss.
But also he said, you know, why is Trump having a religious speaker? I mean, another thing people got to realize is globalists don't have no borders. They believe in open borders. They don't have a religion. You know, that's what these people are. So, I mean, I don't mind having somebody speaking about, you know, Islam or Jesus or, anything like that.
I'm going to back up on you a little bit. I think the globalists do want a religion because it's a very powerful device for controlling the population. They're still looking around for the one they think will work best for them. It's like when you go back to ancient Rome, where Constantine declared Christianity the official religion of Rome. He himself was not Christian. He wasn't baptized till he was on his deathbed. But he just accepted the political reality that unless he declared a single religion for all of Rome, the religious wars were going to tear the empire apart. And he did not personally agree with Christianity, but he saw that was the one that was most likely to calm everything down. And it was most useful to Rome to control all of the Roman people. Remember that bit in the Bible about render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's? That was part of the control mechanism. You know, you will give us your wealth when we ask for it, or you will not get into heaven.
That's what scares me the most, Mike, is we're like Rome, Soviet Union territory now because...
I agree.
You look at Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters and John McCain. These people don't know what today's date is, you know, but yet they think they're gods.
Yes.
So that's what's really scary, you know, I mean, and you look at the Russian, was it the ambassador who died for the UN? Rest in peace for him, but he was the most sane. Look at Samantha Powers. That was, I mean, it's totally mental case, I think.
I don't know. I'm beginning to think we've drugged our entire nation into insanity with all these prescription psychiatric medications. But, you know, there is an unfortunate reality, and that is too much adulation can really start messing with your head. I got to see a lot of it up close when I was working in film and television. People who just, you know, because they'd gotten lucky, they really thought that they were gods incarnate. And some of these people had egos the size of the solar system, and yet in personal life they really weren't anybody you'd want to hang out with. So that's obviously happened to people like Nancy Pelosi, who's been in office forever, or John McCain, who's been in office forever, and they start to believe their own press relations, and yes, they develop monstrous egos.
They're decadent, Mike. That's
yes.
what it is. They're decadent. And Mike, I wanted to talk real quick about that 7th floor group that was cleared out.
Yes.
Now, that's in the State Department, so there's others in the NSA and the CIA, and maybe in the DIA. I mean, they're going to be all over the place. So, but he needs to do that. He needs to clear these people out, and he's got to do it sooner rather than later, I believe.
I agree. I absolutely agree. The Donald Trump presidency is not going to start until the remnants of the Obama presidency are absolutely excised.
And don't forget the Bush administration with Cheney, because Victoria Nuland was part of that neocon gang.
Yes.
And she was instrumental in the Ukraine coup with Hillary Clinton, Obama, John Kerry. You know, it's emerging of neocons and neoliberalism. Would you say they're almost on the same page now?
Yeah, basically it's a war party, and they're trying to appeal to both Republicans and Democrats by saying neoconservative or neoliberal, but it really is a war party. And that's all that they've ever pushed for on either side, war and dictatorship across the entire globe.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks. We're going to take a phone call from Jonathan in Texas, and then we're going to close the phone lines. Jonathan, what's on your mind?
Hey, I appreciate you taking my phone call, Michael. That last caller who is absolutely right. Well, not the last caller, but the one talking about Mike Pence and how Donald Trump needs to rein him in.
Yes.
He does need to rein him in, because not only did Mike Pence pledge his support to NATO, but he also pledged, I think, at the end of March to send another 1,000 troops to Poland.
Okay, now let's be very, very careful here. Mike Pence, as vice president, does not have the authority to send 1,000 troops to Poland. If he's made that statement, then Trump has signed off on it, or the Pentagon has signed off on it.
Well,
Pence by himself, the only legal authority Mike Pence has, as long as he's the vice president, is that he is president of the Senate and can vote to break ties, and that's it. The vice president has actually very little legal authority. In fact, John Adams called it the most boring job in the entire U.S. government. The only time Mike Pence has any authority is if Donald Trump is incapacitated, and already the Democrats are screaming that they're going to invoke the 25th Amendment and get Donald Trump out that way.
But beyond the whole political thing, the one I really wanted to get at was the troops sending over there, along with the tanks that we already have over there. People got to know it's not. There's a Russian enclave called Kaliningrad there, with a lot of missiles and everything, and we sent them less than 100 miles, 85 miles to be exact.
Yes.
And then not only do you have that, but you know, Russia and Iran, they're buddies, you know, and anything happens to Iran, Russia's going to go in there. And, you know, you're right. This is a war party. But you see, you got the left who wants war with Russia. Because the left is your bankers, your money people, the people who want to take other people's resources. And the right, just like people said, it's more religious. It's more Islam and, you know, Muslims and ISIS under your bed, give us your money. And, you know, Russia, this is still very at play here. Because, I mean, just like you said, in one of your previous shows, who would have thought World War I would have erupted out of the shooting, you know, in a little country, you know? But there's a good video on YouTube. Yeah, there's a good video on YouTube called it's Apocalypse World War I, and it only showed you the first part of it. But I mean, Austria and Hungary, when they went into Serbia, the guy treated his troops like they were nothing. He was like, "This is my war, and I'm going to win it." I mean, just like the last caller said about our politicians. They have such a big personality. They're going to treat us like cannon fodder.
Yes.
And they're going to tell you what you want to hear. You know, the only reason why we got Obama, because if George W. Bush had the sense of fake news, then he could have just said, those casualties are fake. Mission accomplished. We're winning.
Well, he did say that. In Iraq, he said mission accomplished, you know, and to talk about fake news, I mean, one of the biggest fake news of history is 9/11. One of the biggest fake news stories in all of history is 9/11, and that happened under George W. Bush. And he sat there reading about his pet goats, and everybody knew that, you know, he knew he was safe from attack there.
Yeah, but the reason he couldn't get away with mission accomplished is because people were on the ground saying, no, dude, we're having tanks being blown up still, and everybody in them dying. And there's people coming back. Like, there's still major operations going on. How can you say mission accomplished? You're still sending in the surge at the time he said mission accomplished. He sent in the surge, getting people, you know, recruiters lying to not only immigrants, but illegal immigrants. offering them green cards.
Bush said it because he thought that's what the majority of the American people wanted to hear, and he could count on the corporate media to put it on out there as the gospel truth. Mission accomplished in Iraq. There's a little mop-up going on, but nothing you need to pay attention to. On to Iran and Syria and Libya and Yemen.
Yeah. And now you got the CIA director giving a peace prize to the Saudi dude. And they're, oh my God, man. I could just see them, Israel saying, we're going to go attack Iran. And then they're going to say, yeah, what Saudi Arabia and Israel are going to do, they're just going to go bomb it. And then we're going to have our ground troops go in to clean it up. That's what they're going to do.
Oh, yeah, Israel is a master at starting a war and then demanding the U.S. come on in and clean up the mess.
And I got another question. Do you think the reason why Iran dropped the petrodollar, do you think they really got, like, the nuclear reactor already going? And once they put that oil out on the market, it's really going to hurt?
No, the two are unconnected. Iran has dropped the petrodollar because the dollar itself is not seen as trustworthy anymore, and nations just don't want to use it. And it isn't just Iran that dropped the petrodollar. Iraq did. So did Libya. That's what triggered these invasions. And Iran's talking about dropping the petrodollar. What happens? Oh, Iran's getting a nuclear bomb. Iran is doing terrible things. We've got to invade. The prime motive of all of these wars started by the United States of America is to bring the world back under the hegemonic domination of the U.S. paper dollar. Because right now, forcing the world to use our dollar, borrowed at interest, is the only thing holding our economy up right now.
Do you think it's the elite's religion that keeps them? Because everybody says they don't have a religion. I think they do. Because you think about it, they have technology out there that can make all our lives prosperous. They got robots who could grow our own food and everything and maintain themselves. But it's like a satanic type of thinking, like, oh no, you can't have anything to make you more comfortable or something. You can't live.
It's not religious. It is simply maximizing profit from the people for the least amount of investment and upkeep. Yeah, they could make the world a lot better for ordinary people, but they can't make money doing it. The money is made by keeping wages and salaries low and prices high, and just basically, wringing whatever they can out of the general population. They see us as basically livestock, human capital, if you will, and all world leaders and CEOs, they're thinking about maximizing profitability, and that's why you see corporations selling dangerous, ineffective products that wear out very, very quickly. Wars of conquest. They really have developed an ego problem where they see themselves as a separate species, like the Eloi and the Morlock, and we're just here to be fed upon. And they really do behave that way. Anyway, listen, Jonathan.
Why is the profitability, though?
Jonathan, got to let you go. I'm sorry. I got to let you go. We got to do some news here. So we're going to close the phone lines here for a little bit. And as far as the elites having a religion, I think their first religion is worship of themselves. Their second religion is worship of wealth. And their third religion is just whatever the church they can go to that tells them what they're doing is somehow blessed by God. There are a lot of religions that actually teach wealth is the sign of God's favor. If you're making tons of money, it's because God loves you, and everything that you do to get that money is A-OK with Him. They're looking for ways to assuage their guilt because they know they are, in fact, not behaving very well. Okay, we're going to get into some news here. We're stepping on back here to this dodgy dossier about Donald Trump. Was a last-ditch effort to try and destroy him. Was this report that came on out from this ex-intelligence agent who's now working for all these various public relations firms. Robert David Steele was the guy who came up with this dossier claiming that Donald Trump had been in the presidential suite at the Moscow Hotel, the same place where Obama had stayed, and he'd had two hookers with him, and they had vandalized the bedroom. And it was complete and utter nonsense, and the corporate media is out there saying, see what Donald Trump has done. And it's the dodgy dossier from Spies R Us, and this guy, Robert David Steele, when you start digging into his background, the guy is a spook, And, of course, the one thing they teach you when you're with the Central Intelligence Agency is not only is lying cool and fun and your patriotic duty, but they teach you how to do it very well. That's one of the skills that you learn at the CIA's farm. Now then, question coming on out over at Zero Hedge. Who's really behind this soft coup, Obama-founded activist group that is trying to organize all these protests and make it look like there's a color revolution against Donald Trump? And we're starting to see officialdom take note, because I think most people are very rational in thinking the last thing we need in this country is an actual civil war in the streets. Because winning a war against Russia and China is already a very iffy business. If we're also having a civil war in the streets of America, that's going to make it impossible. A civil war in the streets of America would actually bring an end to the neoliberal desire for war with Russia and China. Now, George Soros is now being looked at by Congress. They're starting to look into what Soros has been doing, mostly on the basis of complaints, not just from various groups inside the United States, but foreign governments are now officially complaining about George Soros tinkering with their internal politics. That's a tacky no-no. More about that when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about George Soros. And a lot of people this whole last year have been saying, why isn't something being done about this guy? He's spending his billions to fund Black Lives Matter, riots in the streets, all these anti-Trump protests all over the place. And, of course, Soros and his Open Society foundations have been running around the world intervening in foreign governments, leading to, well, for example, the junta in Kiev, and other governments are starting to crack down on him. Russia has now banned any Soros NGOs from working inside their country because they caught them trying to destabilize their society. Macedonia's cracked down on him. Serbia's cracking down on him. Hungary's cracked down on him. And these foreign governments are now complaining officially to the United States government about George Soros and what he's doing. And so right now, Congress is starting to conduct an investigation into looking at what Soros has been up to. And, of course, we know they're going to hit pay dirt. Because at the very least, George Soros is in violation of the Logan Act, which forbids a private citizen, no matter how wealthy, from engaging in foreign policy on their own. And Soros is in violation of the USA Patriot Act, funding these violent groups to try and coerce a change in the politics of the United States of America. This is way, way, way overdue. Now, as you know, there is a lot of attention starting to be focused on Brian Pagliano. And I still have seen no indication that he is still alive. But even though he got an immunity deal during the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server, he refused to testify. He has now ignored 2 congressional subpoenas. Now, this is the guy who set up the original server. And he knows if it was set up securely or if it was left with intentional backdoors. Congress wants to investigate, and they're now talking about taking legal action to have him arrested and brought before Congress. I'm going to wager a nickel here right now they'll never find him. Because if I'm right that Hillary Clinton was selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using that email server and using her Clinton Foundation to collect and launder the money, then Brian Pagliano is a very serious liability for Hillary Clinton, and we know from history, liabilities to the Clintons do not live very long. Now, I want to give you an example of how the corporate media is still spinning what's going on. Story picked up by Blacklisted News. The headline was, Trump gets ready to pick John Bolton as advisor. And that was the blaring headline, and they even admit within the article Ted Cruz was pushing Bolton. More about that after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. Now, getting back onto this story, we were seeing all these headlines around about how Trump gets ready to pick John Bolton as advisor. And you get further into the article and admits Ted Cruz was pushing for John Bolton to be the replacement for General Flynn. And why did they put that headline out there? It's part of a repeating pattern of the corporate media predicting what Trump will do, and it's always something that Trump's supporters would find very offensive and troubling. Oh, I mean, and even Claire fell for it. I'm so disappointed that Trump is going to pick John Bolton. Now, even within the story itself, it said Bolton was just one name on a very, very long list, and the reality is that President Trump actually picked Lieutenant General McMaster to be the new national security advisor. But the corporate media puts out these prognostications. He's going to pick Bolton in order to discourage and disenchant Trump's backers. That's part of the propaganda. Story coming out of government slaves. The president needs to purge and start fresh. The White House staff has been infiltrated and infested. Absolutely right. Most of them the holdovers. I do not understand why Donald Trump, knowing how hostile the entrenched establishment is to him, didn't come on in and say, you're all fired. We're going to get a bunch of people who we know can do the job, who are outside the political establishment. That's really what Trump should be doing, is hiring people who are not part of that political mainstream to be his staff in the White House, because they're not going to come in with a bunch of compromising connections and prior allegiances and hidden agendas, and that's what he's dealing with right now. Now, a little bit of good news. Remember Ann Revelle? She was the FCC commissioner appointed by Barack Obama, who was pushing for internet censorship. And she went after a Drudge Report and no doubt would like to go after all those websites listed by the Washington Post as arms of Russian intelligence or Russian propaganda. And apparently now she has been forced to resign. So the swamp is being drained, but I fear a little too slowly, because Trump is having to fight off all those alligators here. Now, Donald Trump's defense chief, Mattis, is on his first trip to Iraq, and he's out there saying we're not in Iraq to seize anybody's oil, and partly that was in order to negate a comment Trump told the CIA back in January, we should have kept the oil, maybe you'll have another chance. And this, I think, is a good example of my primary concern with Donald Trump, that too much of his worldview is based on what he's been seeing on the lying corporate media all his life. Now, I understand he's very, very busy right now, but he has to understand, he does understand very obviously, the corporate media is lying and distorting the news about Trump and his administration. But Trump needs to take a deep breath, take a weekend down to Camp David, and sit back and say, gee, I wonder what else the corporate media has been lying about. Because the invasion of Iraq was never about seizing Iraq's oil. We have ample supplies of oil in this country. It was about forcing Iraq to sell that oil only for the U.S. dollar. Same situation in Libya. Keeping that petrodollar deal propped up to keep up foreign demand for U.S. dollars following Richard Nixon's ending of gold convertibility and the collapse of Bretton Woods. And for Trump to be couching Iraq in terms of seizing their oil tells me he does not really understand the ultimate objective behind all these wars of conquest. And that makes him very, very dangerous and reckless. He could make some serious, serious mistakes. Now, speaking of Iraq, Iraq has launched an operation to take back western Mosul from ISIS. And apparently they're getting really close. They're within striking distance from the Mosul International Airport. And if they can retake that, then ISIS supply line is cut off. Story out of Global Research in California. The fakest news, the Iraq War itself. I disagree. I would think 9/11. But they're basically talking about how the war in Iraq was sold on the claim that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. And they're commenting on this very alarming situation that even though President George W. Bush, former Prime Minister Tony Blair, the CIA, the Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, Secretary of State Powell, the National Security Advisor Rice, and Bush's chief strategist Rove Curveball, and other top U.S. government officials have all publicly admitted they knew all along Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction, and yet a recent YouGov poll shows that by a slim margin, most Americans are still buying this corporate media nonsense that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. We just couldn't find them. Now, obviously, the corporate media is selling a huge bit of propaganda. Unfortunately, they're selling it into fertile ground, because we have to take into account that Americans who supported the invasion of Iraq do not want to have to admit to themselves they were wrong to have done so. And so they're going to grab onto any piece of propaganda, no matter how flimsy, to save themselves from self-examination. Oh, I know he had those WMDs. I was right to support the war. I was right to support torturing those Iraqis to death because I believe there were weapons of mass destruction someplace because ABC, CNN, CBS, Fox, BBC told me. And I believe as I am told to believe here. Donald Trump, and again, this is coming from a view of Yemen based on what he's seen on TV. Donald Trump is changing policy on Yemen that may effectively cut off all humanitarian relief to the war-torn nation, which, given that humanitarian relief is for the civilians, constitutes a war crime. And I'm very, very concerned that, between still viewing the world as he saw it on those TV screens and the constant distractions from the attacks at home, that Trump is either making some or being led to make some very, very bad decisions. Now then, let's get on over to Syria. A lot of stuff going on in Syria. People are starting to wag their fingers rather sternly at Amnesty International over that report they brought out a week ago saying that Assad had a secret prison facility where over 13,000 people have been tortured to death, according to the American corporate media. Now, believe it or not, that's not what the Amnesty report actually said. It said between 5,000 and 13,000. And the media said, oh, at least 13,000. So that they were distorting an existing lie. But more and more people are going back and saying, obviously, Amnesty International has been co-opted. They used to be considered respectable, but they're obviously compromised by the deep state propaganda machine. I don't think it's a recent thing, because you need to remember, Amnesty International claimed to corroborate the story that Iraq soldiers invading Kuwait stole incubators from the hospitals to send back to Iraq and left the babies to die on the cold floor. And of course, that story was exposed as a complete lie. For one thing, the hospital staff wouldn't just stand there and leave the babies on the floor. They'd pick them up and put them in blankets, which is how they dealt with premature babies before the incubators came along. And as it turned out, the entire story was a complete fiction created by public relations firm Hill and Knowlton. The nurse who went on camera before the United Nations, tears pouring from her eyes, wasn't even a nurse. She was the daughter of the Kuwait ambassador. It was a complete fraud, manufactured from the very beginning, and Amnesty International added their imprimatur to it. Obviously, from this point forward, nothing Amnesty International says should be taken at face value. Now then, as we mentioned earlier in the show, Russia's ambassador to the United Nations, Vitaly Churkin, has died in New York at age 64. Actually, he was one day shy of his 65th birthday. We don't have a lot of details. They are not providing an official cause of death just yet. But apparently Putin is very much saddened by this situation, because so many of his ambassadors seem to be dying strangely all over the West. But Churkin's death is being considered untimely and sudden. Apparently, he was at work. He reported suddenly feeling ill, was rushed to the hospital, and passed away. Now, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham is out there cheering that 2017 is going to be the year of kicking Russia in the ass. And he's threatening a new round of sanctions over Moscow's alleged U.S. election interference, even though the CIA and the FBI is saying it's garbage. So, Lindsey, if you really feel that way, if you think 2017 is the year of kicking Russia's ass, here's your rifle, here's your parachute. We ran out of the camo BDU, so here's a bright day-glow orange jumpsuit left over from the CIA's torture centers. Watch your head climbing into that transport, and we'll phone Putin and tell him you are on your way to kick him in the ass all by yourself. But after that whopper about Russia's interference in our elections, after the whopper about Saddam's nukes, after the whopper about Assad gassing his own people, the whoppers about torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Pearl Harbor being a surprise, Spanish mine sinking USS Maine, the Lusitania not smuggling weapons, etc., 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 you will forgive we, the American people, if we sit this one out. Because we are tired of being lied into wars. If you feel strongly that there should be a war against Russia, you personally go fight it. Have fun. Das vidanya. Now, as one of our callers mentioned earlier, the U.S. is sending 1,000 troops to Poland to deter Russian aggression. And these 1,000 troops and supporting vehicles are going to Orsice, a town in northeastern Poland, and it is just 80 miles away from Russian territory. Now, let's be honest here. There is no Russian aggression. Russia has not initiated an attack against the West in all of its history. The closest it came was its invasion of Poland when it was allied to Nazi Germany, and Germany initiated that attack. So let us be historically clear here. If there were Russian ships floating around the Gulf of Mexico, if there were Russian warships outside New York Harbor or Los Angeles Harbor, then if we saw Russian troops and weapons massed on the northern side of our border with Canada or the southern side of our border with Mexico, then you can make an argument that Russia is behaving aggressively. But take a look at who it is who's moving all the troops and all the weapons to the Russian border. And that tells you who the real aggressor is. And it's not Russia. Now, U.S. House Armed Services Committee Chairman Thornberry is out there saying, well, yeah, we're sending more troops to Afghanistan, but it doesn't mean we're escalating the war in Afghanistan. There won't be another military mission there. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. The problem is that Afghanistan is getting sick of their U.S. foreign puppet rule. Afghanistan is getting sick of the curse of heroin and opium once again seizing their country. Now, the Taliban had eradicated opium production completely within Afghanistan. If you were caught with a poppy, they'd cut your hand off. Draconian, but it worked. As soon as the U.S. invaded Afghanistan, the poppies are blooming. They've got bumper crops. And cheap opium is flowing out of Afghanistan onto the streets of the United States of America. This is part of a very long and tragic history of direct U.S. government involvement in illegal drugs, recreational drugs, flooding the streets of the United States of America. It was happening during Vietnam when Air America, working for the CIA, was flying Kun Sa's opium back to the United States of America, selling it into the black neighborhoods. That whole 1980s Iran-Contra scandal. Non-traceable military weapons were being smuggled from Arkansas under then-Governor Bill Clinton down to Nicaragua to use against the Sandinistas. And to fund it all, because it was not sanctioned by Congress, they were literally flying tons of cocaine back into the United States of America and selling it to our children. The biggest drug smuggler in the country is the country. That's the big, deep, dark, ugly secret out there. Now then, over in France, Marine Le Pen is advancing in the French polls. And a big part of her support is coming from French people concerned about the flood of refugees and the not coincidental increase in acts of terror and violence in their streets. Paris is on fire right now from all the migrants rioting to get free stuff that they were promised they were going to get. Now, Marine Le Pen's main rival, Macron, has basically done a hoof-and-mouth disease, calling French colonialism a crime against humanity. And he may have meant well, but the remarks have backfired spectacularly. He's been forced to publicly apologize, and he's taken a major, major hit in the polls. So come the French election cycle in April and May, it does look like Marine Le Pen could win. But already France's equivalent of the opposition party is starting to fight dirty, because there was this big headline on how Marine Le Pen's Front National headquarters have been raided by police. And the latest reports are they didn't actually find anything, but it generated all kinds of headlines to make Marine Le Pen look like she is not somebody who should be allowed to be president of France. Politics is a dirty business. We all know it. Just wish they wouldn't revel in it quite so much. Now, over in Belarus, their leader, Alexander Lukashenko, likes to describe himself as Europe's last dictator. And he's hung onto power by stealing elections, sends opposition politicians to slave labor camps. And now he has taken perhaps one step too far, because he's declared a social parasite tax on unemployed people. And it has triggered mass marches all over the country, because what could be more stupid than trying to impose a new tax on people who are out of work and not making any money whatsoever? If Belarus had an equivalent of a 25th Amendment, now would be the time to be doing it. You don't tax people who don't have anything to tax. If your economy is in trouble, you start taxing the people who've got the wealth. Doesn't that make sense? Anyway, down in Ecuador, their presidential election is likely headed for a runoff. They've had the first round, 80% of the votes counted, and Lenin Moreno and Guillermo Lasso do not have enough votes to become the president in the first round. So there's going to be a runoff election here. Here's the good news. The candidate who wanted to end Julian Assange's asylum, Patricio Ziqualinda, did not do very well at all. So he is out of the race, and Julian Assange can breathe a sigh of relief. Okay. Message to our control room here. Now, you're probably familiar with a website called If Americans Knew. And it's been around for quite a while, and we'll talk about that when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about a website, If Americans Knew. It's run by a wonderful lady named Allison Weir. And all it does is present factual, documented information about what's going on in Israel and Palestine. How many Palestinians are being killed? How many Israelis are being killed? How many Palestinian children are being killed? How many Israeli children are being killed? How many Palestinian children are being locked up in prison? How many Israeli children locked up? Just side-by-side comparisons about what's really going on. Average wealth of an Israeli, average wealth of a Palestinian, and so forth and so on. And over at UC Berkeley, she was invited to give a talk by the Social Justice Committee of the Berkeley Fellowship of Unitarian Universalists. And as soon as it was announced, pro-Israel activists went to work to get the event canceled. They were putting up blog posts and Craigslist ads and everything, just screaming, "You can't have her, you can't have her." And fortunately, they refused to back down, and the event went ahead as planned. But, I mean, how far Berkeley has fallen. Because back in the 1960s, we all remember, Berkeley was the champion of freedom of speech. There was nothing that was off limits. And today, Berkeley, like so many other universities here in the United States of America, is a champion of the status quo. We will tell you what to believe. We will tell you what to think. Sort of reminds me of that control voice on the old Outer Limits TV series. We will control everything you see and hear. And for that, those kids only had to go into $60,000, $70,000 worth of student loan debt to get their brains washed. Could get your brains paralyzed for far less money just with scotch. If you want to kill your own brain off, much cheaper to do it that way than UC Berkeley. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Mo in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. I just want to make a comment. I think a lot of that I've heard. I don't know if this is true, but this whole thing with Trump and firing the general there may have something to do with him exposing a friend of Pence's. And I know that this Epstein guy, when the Lolita Island was set up, his partner was a Mossad agent, and it was all wire. He's got the goods on everybody. I think maybe there's something there where General Flynn put the finger on somebody that not implicated Pence necessarily, but a friend of his. I mean, they got the goods on a lot of congressmen, and I think it kind of makes sense to me. I wanted to get your thoughts.
Well, it's certainly not beyond the realm of possibility. We know that the fact that our political leaders engage in some absolutely deplorable behavior is nothing new. I mean, go on back to the Franklin scandal. That one reached all the way into the White House, but we also learned in the aftermath of that one that when something that horrible risks being exposed, the entire government will come together in defense of themselves. And it may be, we know that there were some indications in the John Podesta emails about some things going on. I think there was an attempt to try and set it up and discredit it with the poison the well story regarding that one pizza parlor. But we know that it is a reality. People in positions of power like to engage in such things for whatever reason it gets them off. And, yeah, there were indications that Michael Flynn had been looking into this and was pointing some fingers about this kind of behavior, mostly because, let's be very, very honest, if any politician is engaging in child sexual molestation and it's captured on video, whoever's got that video now owns that politician. And that politician is now a threat to the national security because they will do anything, I mean anything, to keep that video from coming on out, including betraying our national secrets to our direst enemies. And so I would be fully on board on saying that when we do our security checks on anybody allowed into the government, this has to be something that needs to be looked into as to whether they have this kind of sick behavior in their background, because that is a vector for them to be exploited by foreign intelligence services. Mo, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take a phone call. James in Tokyo, Ohio gozaimasu. What's on your mind today?
Ohio gozaimasu, from a legal immigrant. Michael, I caught your Friday show on YouTube on Saturday, and I am so disappointed with you. After all those kind words about Trump and you wearing that Putin on a pony T-shirt, would you believe that many of your listeners might feel that you are a secret agent working for the Russian arm of chaos, whose main mission is probably to hold a legal referendum in Hawaii, or otherwise known in U.S. government lingo, an armed invasion and illegal annexation, so you can give Hawaii to the Ruskies. And, for your information, the Honorable John McCain, a hero who has individually destroyed more U.S. airplanes and killed more U.S. soldiers than any single enemy combatant, said that it is widely known in intelligence circles that Putin never even gave that pony even one sugar cube or whispered in its ear.
Well, look at the bright side. You know, if John McCain loses one more U.S. aircraft, he'll qualify as an enemy ace.
Well, Mikhail, would you believe that woman who you finally called the lovely Lady Claire is actually the dark and sinister Natasha, a Russian Asian who grew up in an exact copy of a town in Middle America 3 hours outside of Moscow, whose primary purpose is to provide you with pro-Putin propaganda.
Actually, she grew up in San Francisco, or maybe it was a complete copy of San Francisco. Anyway, what else is on your mind?
Well, would you believe that your conversation with Dustin from New Jersey, otherwise known as Dmitry from Stalingrad, who works out of the Russian consulate, about U.S. and Soviet armaments, that your talks with that comrade is against the Logan Act. So that's subversion, treason, mutiny.
Okay, James, we all laughed. Don't milk it. What's on your, let's calm down and get to the real world.
Pedophile gate.
Yes.
There's a lot of news going around of how the global pedophiles, part of the elitists, are going to be taken down. I'm hoping it's true. 2,000 kids a day disappear. And I think it's also, as you said, in the realm of possibility. I mean, you had Clinton and Hillary visiting Epstein's Island. Jimmy Savile was best friends with Prince Charles. Prince Andrew visited the island. You had Dennis Hastert, Barney Frank, and numerous other people. And I'm really hoping that there's something into it. And recently, with the arrest of over 1,500, a ring of child traffickers and freeing hundreds of children from them, I think there could be something to it. What do you think?
Well, no, there is no question that sexual abuse of children is taking place around the world. I find it absolutely repugnant. It's politicians, it's the clergy, but again, going back to the Franklin scandal, we know that when this subject starts to get too near the surface, everybody circles the wagons, and they will do whatever it takes to discredit the whole idea, which is why I was cautious with all the focus on Pizzagate, because the so-called evidence linking to this pizza parlor, to me, was flimsy, almost on the edge of being manufactured. But as far as the issue itself is concerned, yeah, it's very real. And the question I have has to be that when you have a Jeff Epstein who sets up an island like this, and it's filled with underage young lovelies, and everybody's flying down there to get their jollies off, doesn't it even occur to them that the place is wired with cameras and microphones? I mean, it's a degree of recklessness that borders on incompetency. And again, setting aside the moral issues, setting aside the fact that this kind of behavior is permanently damaging to the children, okay, you have to realize anybody who's engaging in this kind of behavior is an immediate risk to the nation's security because they can be blackmailed with it. And maybe we talk about the deep state. Maybe that's what glues it all together, is the deep state is run by the people who've got the videotapes and the recordings of the world's politicians engaging in this sort of behavior, whether it's at Epstein's Islands or wherever they have the various the Bilderbergers or whatever, or just private little meetings. And you have to realize that there does need to be a campaign to get this behavior exposed and excised from our political body, because it is a very obvious vector for blackmailing operations on our various politicians. And maybe they're already so corrupt and they're already being so blackmailed, one more just doesn't seem to be all that big a deal. but it just stuns me that anybody who's been given a position of responsibility and authority in the United States government would even dare take the risk of even fooling around on their spouse, let alone going after a little kid, knowing that if it gets caught on tape or recorded, that they're open to blackmail and control from outside to the detriment of our society. It just boggles the mind that anybody would take that chance, but apparently they have.
Well, for the kids and for the parents.
Hello?
Oh, yeah, for the kids and for the parents, I'm hoping that something's going to come of it, and that this could also perhaps even bring down the deep state. That's all I have to say.
Well,
have a good day.
Well, thank you very much. Have a good day. And but again, there is no question there is a problem. And I got a lot of emails from people saying, "Why aren't you following Pizzagate?" And it felt like it was a setup, and I wanted to tread cautiously because we're already seeing indications of efforts to find any excuse to sue the independent media out of existence. And we have to be very, very careful. We are not lured into making a defamatory comment or accusation about anybody that could be used to take us into court and basically sue us out of existence, as is already happening to some of the people in the independent media, like Webster Tarpley. So we do have to be more professional than the professionals. But again, to clarify, my cautions about Pizzagate notwithstanding, there is no question there is a huge problem with this kind of behavior in anybody in positions of power, whether it's clergy or political or economic. It just seems to be something that occurs to them that they want to do. And maybe it is that expression of power and dominance. Maybe these are people for whom life has given them so much. They don't feel that there's any challenge, and they want to do something that is so repugnant to ordinary people and get away with it. There's the thrill from that. Or maybe it's a rite of passage. I don't really know. I do know it's a real problem, and I have a real hard time with it. I don't understand it, and I don't even want to. I'm not even vaguely curious. I personally view it as very, very sick behavior, because it's not just having sex with a child. It's stealing away their innocence. Because at that point, they stop being a child and they're forced to becoming an adult, and that's a one-way trip. I think children should be allowed to remain children for as long as they can. We all got to grow up sometime. But let's not force it at such an early, early age, because you're taking away something from these children that can never, ever be replaced. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Nick in Southern California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Based on that last call, as far as the ruining of children's innocence, there's been an attack out there on Milo. I guess some comments he made.
Yes.
Some jokes he had made early in his career. He does have a video explaining a lot of that. A lot of it's been taken out of context, but one of the things that you pointed out, I think 2 weeks ago, was that humor is a really powerful weapon. Mm-hmm. And Milo himself says that, the establishment doesn't like him because he uses humor to put forth his message. And he's kind of used humor to cope with what happened to him at the hands of somebody in a position of trust. Mm-hmm. So, that was something that I'm not sure how many people out there know that attack has gone on, but they probably should maybe hear it from the horse's mouth as far as what those comments were and what they were about.
Yeah, one of our members put up a story from Milo. Basically, it was a transcript laying on out, and it would hardly be the first time that government has used allegations of this kind of behavior to destroy somebody, because it is, to ordinary people, so shocking that even an eventual exoneration does not remove the stain from them. So it can be used to really destroy people that the system wants destroyed.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much it, although I did want to make a correction. The imitation city of San Francisco in Russia really doesn't exist. San Francisco itself is communist. I mean, there's no need for a copy.
Point taken. Point taken. You're absolutely right. I had forgotten all about that. I'm going to have to I have to be very, very careful with the Lady Claire from now on. I hadn't realized that about her upbringing. Anyway, listen, Nick, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to take one more phone call from Michael in Rhode Island, and we're going to close the lines again because I still have a lot of news to get through. Michael, what's on your mind?
Michael, how are you? Long-time sporadic listener here.
Okay.
I have two questions for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Number one, Trump, it seemed to me that you were 99% sure that he was the right guy for the job, and I want to know if you are still in the above 90 percentile in your thinking on Trump.
Well, I don't think I ever put it in quite that way. I think my comment was that Donald Trump at his absolute worst is still a heck of a lot better than Hillary at her best. And I made no secret during the campaign that my my political support for Donald Trump wasn't so much support for Donald Trump as it was an attempt to pry the Bush-Clinton duopoly from the throat of the nation, and so we have to count success on that. Now, obviously, that being said, I'm glad that Trump defeated Hillary Clinton despite the massive election fraud, but that doesn't mean I'm not giving Donald Trump, a clean pass. There are things he's doing I don't agree with. I still think that he is very dangerously naive about what's really going on in the world, and I wish there was a way to communicate with him some basic reality as to what's going on. But he's dealing with an establishment, even within his own White House, that is out to sabotage him or hijack him or direct him. And again, it very much reminds me of that part of Gulliver's Travels where they had the flappers, the ones who would speak on behalf of the rulers by means of that little bladder that moved the jaw. And, of course, it were the flappers who were really running the country, not the rulers. And that seems to be the situation we're evolving toward, where Donald Trump doesn't realize how much of the country's control is still outside of his grasp. And even the same thing during the years leading to the demise of the Merovingian kings, where they were literally called the feeble kings because they had absolutely no power even within their own palace. It had all passed to the bureaucrats. Same story with Aisanjiro Puyi, the last emperor of China, where he just lived in splendor, and the actual control of China had passed to the bureaucrats around him at Forbidden City.
Okay. So I had high hopes for Trump. I had high hopes for Obama because he was such a smooth talker. And when it comes down to, I'm in the same position now with Trump as I was with Obama. His actions are not revealing his true intentions, in my estimation. I mean, this is my opinion. And my thoughts are that he's been in this game for a long time. He's been a businessman for a long time. He's been in the circles for a long time. And I think that he is actually more astute, let's say, than he lets on.
I would like to see that. I have no doubt he's a very, very sharp man. But again, his coming from outside from the world of business was both his advantage in the election, and now that he's in the White House, it is his disadvantage because he is still interacting with the people around him as he would fellow businessmen. And that's not the way D.C. politics works.
Well, the D.C. politics, I mean, he was able to build a multi-million-dollar hotel in D.C., was he not?
Yeah, but that's not the same thing as being involved in the politics of Congress and the White House. It's a very, very different world. He's expecting people to be straight with him. He's expecting people to keep their promises because that's the norm in business. He's expecting people for whom he is signing a paycheck that their first loyalty will be with him because that's the way it is in the world of business. And again, in many ways, he's very dangerously naive still. And while he's fighting all of these alligators who are opposed to his draining the swamp, he does need to take a moment and step back and start really thinking and learning very quickly the reality of the new world that he's in.
No, I agree. I guess my point on that would be just that you don't really get to do much in D.C. unless you're flirting with the people in D.C., I guess is the way to put it.
Well, there's two D.C.s.
Right.
There's the administration of the District of Columbia, which is who you deal with when you're going to build a building, and then there is that subset, which is the federal government, which actually operates fairly independently of the District of Columbia's government.
But they operate that District of Columbia under the Enclave Clause protections, I guess, is how you would put it, right?
That would be, well, technically under the Enclave Clause, the federal government doesn't own all of the District of Columbia. It's in kind of this nether world. The only reason it exists is they wanted to avoid an argument among the states as to which state would house the nation's capital. So they created this little District of Columbia with its own administration and its own city government, but no representation. But it is a separate civic government that is operating more or less disconnected from the federal government.
It is certainly a netherworld, if nothing else. And then my second point only would be, I'm a big fan and supporter of James Corbett.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Oh, yes.
His take on Pizzagate is there's so much more that has to be learned. He's doing an open source investigation. That's his MO, let's say.
Yes.
And I'm not picking on you or trying to degrade you because I wouldn't ever, because I really respect you. But it seems to me that your information about the Pizzagate that made you want to shy away from it came from the New York Times. Is that correct or incorrect?
No, that's not. I was getting, when that story first came on up, my mailbox was being flooded with all these people saying, you have to do this, you have to report this, and that's generally a giveaway that you're being set up for a takedown. And so...
Amen to the...
Yeah, so now I'm glad Corbett is looking at it. I would urge caution here, especially after what happened with Webster Tarpley, because he got fed some bad information by somebody he thought he could trust, and he got sued for it. And we're going to see this kind of lawfare approach to the independent media accelerating in the coming months. Thank you very much for the phone call, Michael. We're going to close the phone lines and come back and just do news for the rest of the show. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to cut off the phone lines for the rest of the show because I'm way, way, way behind on my talking points, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about. Now then, as we mentioned on Friday, China has now embargoed all coal importation from North Korea. And I think it was sending a message to the United States that the United States will not use North Korea as a backdoor to their long-desired war with China, so we can expect to see the emphasis shift back to the South China Sea, and apparently U.S. warships are already on their way down there to pound on their chests and make grunting sounds in the trees or whatever it is they do down there. But this is more than just sending a message, because China was a major buyer of North Korea's coal exports. This could be a major blow to North Korea's already fragile economy and could even bring down the government of Kim Jong-un. And maybe we could go back to that idea that was floating around about 6 years ago about reunifying the Koreas, the way Germany had been reunified. And everybody was on board with that until the U.S. got in and started tinkering around and saying, no, North Korea is saying bad things about you when you're not looking. Now, Mark Zuckerberg has put out a huge manifesto. It was published on Facebook. And basically, it's a blueprint for destroying any kind of journalism outside that of Facebook itself. Zuckerberg is not just on the warpath against the independent media. He's on the warpath against all media in general. He wants to make Facebook have monopolistic control over all news and information, just like Monsanto was trying to get monopolistic control on food production with GMOs. And that is a bad, bad sign. Now, interestingly enough, over in Spain, 6 of their central bankers and a financial regulator have just been hauled into court. They're accused of authorizing the public launch of Bankia in 2011, despite repeated warnings from the Bank of Spain's own inspectors the banking group was unviable. And basically what they did is they formed this new bank out of 7 other banks that were already defunct. We're going to take these 7 defunct banks, we're going to make one big giant bank, it'll be wonderful. And of course it resulted in huge costs everybody and harm, and the Spanish courts are looking at throwing these people in prison. And that is a trend that has to spread across the world. Bankers should never be above the law because they are bankers. Now, over in Europe, the German minister is calling for Greece to adopt what's called Plan B, which means that any future bailouts will have to be collateralized with the people's gold and real estate. This is the payoff for private central banking. The real hard assets are put in the pockets of the bankers, and all it cost them was ink and paper. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are closed because we're trying to get through a bunch of news here and stay on top of several evolving situations here. We're talking about the economic news, and we are still seeing this institutional blindness in our economic system in which the goal is to raise prices to maximize profitability and to keep wages and salaries low to maximize profitability. And the ugly reality none of them want to look at is if you are not paying your workers decent wages and salaries, they are not going to go into your retail establishments and buy what you're selling. Now, Henry Ford had much wisdom. First of all, he invented the assembly line, which made the manufacturing of cars much more efficient and made them affordable to the middle class. And Henry Ford followed a simple rule throughout his business life. The best way to become prosperous is to make the community prosper around you. And he made a point of paying his workers enough wages and salaries where they could actually buy the cars they were making. And that became his most powerful advertising tool, because people were looking around and seeing these cars in the streets, seeing that they were being driven by working class people. And that was a shock, because up until that point, having an automobile was the sign of extreme wealth. Only the ultra-rich had automobiles, and all of a sudden, working-class Americans have cars. No more shoveling the barn out of horse poop. And it just took off. And Henry Ford was right. The best way to become prosperous is to make the community around you prosper. Because if the community around you is doing well, you will do better. So apparently, over at Government Slaves, we're finding out McDonald's doesn't follow that. Because apparently they're already out there screaming that a $15 minimum wage would force McDonald's to increase prices 38%. Now, I ran that through a spreadsheet. I don't actually see that. I don't see that at all. There would be a slight increase, but not 38%. This is scare tactics to try and hold down wages and salaries. But, dear McDonald's, if you're not paying people all that much money, they're not going to eat at your restaurant. And they're all still thinking in terms of their business and their clientele, because that's what Adam Smith said. If you're personally greedy, you will advance the system as a whole. And Nobel Prize-winning mathematician John Nash demonstrated in his doctoral dissertation that this was a lot of nonsense. But money junkies don't want to hear that. What they want to hear is Adam Smith saying, it's okay to be personally greedy. You're really helping the world when you're being personally greedy. But all of your workers collectively are also your customers collectively. And if you are not allowing them to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries, they cannot go and buy the products you are selling. That is just the way it is. And you need to adjust to it. The more you offshore, the more you automate, the fewer Americans are going to be walking around with the money to buy whatever it is you're selling. So I guess you can always go to the government and order people to buy what it is you're selling, whether it's vaccines or earpieces for the cell phone. Household debt has now climbed to $12.5 trillion. It's almost to the peak that it reached in 2008, at the point where the mortgage-backed security fraud began to fall apart. It's a very, very bad indicator out there. We're hearing about a surge in defaults in subprime auto loans. We're hearing about the ongoing problem with delinquent and default student loans. You cannot run a nation on debt and have it persist, have it last. Sooner or later, it's going to catch up with you. That is the curse of the private central bank. It's great for the bankers. As we were just saying about Germany and Greece, that's the final payoff. They're saying, we'll loan you more ink and paper, but you've got to pledge your gold and your property as collateral, so that when this debt monster rears its head again, we, the bankers, will own everything, and you will just be serfs living on our land, living in our houses, working in our factories and fields, and you will live your lives by our leave. That's what the New World Order is, a return to fascism. Story coming out of governmentslaves.info. The United Nations Together propaganda is pushing for the flooding of the West with more migrants. We're going to take a moment here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. They're still pushing this globalist dream of everybody blurred together. Nobody has a sense of regional, cultural, or historical identity. Nobody has a strong sense of who they are, which makes them easier to control. Now, I think an example of just how out of control things are getting with all of this nonsense is up in Sweden, where officials in the Swedish government have been accused of a massive cover-up of migrant rape and violence in the name of appearing politically correct. We're not going to tell you the migrants are committing all these crimes because it wouldn't be humane for us to do that. Really? What about the Swedes who already live there? Why aren't you taking care of them? Now, apparently, a Swedish library actually banned a factual book on immigration. It was just a book about how many people are coming on in, what's happening, the rapes and the crime and everything like this, and the library banned it, saying the contents are contrary to human rights. That's it. Now, same challenge to Sweden as I issued to the U.S. government. You show me anywhere in any document that foreign nationals living in other countries have any legal right to enter a country without restriction. You're not going to find it. This human rights has been perverted away from the rights of individual humans and mutated into this right of the population of one country simply marching into another country and taking it over. It is, for all intents and purposes, an unarmed invasion. And as a result of all this political correctness and banning of books, Sweden has become the rape capital of Europe. And there is a backlash there where Swedes are hopping on to this nationalist movement, this populist movement. They're fully on board with Donald Trump saying, this has to stop. This is out of control. And to show you just how over the top Sweden has gone with political correctness, a Swedish court has ruled in favor of a marriage between a 14-year-old Syrian refugee and her 21-year-old husband on the basis of Sharia law. And by the way, these two are cousins. And the Swedish court said, well, since it's okay in Syria where they came from, we're going to declare it to be okay here. Oh, and by the way, the girl is pregnant. Now, look up your basic textbooks on genetics and look at why it is illegal on pretty much most of planet Earth for cousins to marry and bear children. But I'm sure those very generous Swedish taxpayers will be happy to pony up the money for seriously malformed babies that are going to start resulting here. Now, Donald Trump is getting ready to issue a new executive order. He's dropped trying to fight the Ninth Circus Court of Appeals on his previous executive order. It's being recrafted to basically avoid the arguments that were being made. It's still going to be the same 7 countries. This order, though, will not be effective on people holding dual citizenship or green cards. And provision will be made for people who are in transit at the time the executive order goes into effect. So they're going to handle this one a lot better. And once again, we're going to see everybody screaming, it's a Muslim ban, it's a Muslim ban, it's a Muslim ban. No, it isn't. It's a ban on travel from countries that are known hotbeds of terrorism. Now, the corporate media is out there with some fake news saying that Donald Trump claimed there was a terror attack last night in Sweden. And apparently Donald Trump was responding to a story that made that claim in Fox News. It's now been discredited. And now Fox News is turning on Donald Trump for embarrassing them. Okay. All right. Interesting little video on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. It's an interview with John McCain, and he actually uses the phrase, the New World Order. He's out there saying this New World Order we want has to have freedom of the press. Now, by freedom of the press, John McCain does not mean Republic Broadcasting and WhatReallyHappened.com. John McCain means ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, CNN, BBC. And John McCain is trying to defend those corporate media liars from Donald Trump, saying that if Donald Trump challenges the accuracy of what's in the corporate media, that's the kind of thing that dictators do. Actually, no, dictators use the corporate media to feed their populations false information. And that's what's going on. But it is revealing that John McCain is out there openly talking about this New World Order. We've got to have freedom of the press. Of our press, not your press, but our press. And he's out there basically saying that Donald Trump is not allowed to take an adversarial position against the corporate media, even if they're lying against him, because that's the language of dictators. I mean, that is ridiculous. The First Amendment gives us all a right to stand up and say when somebody's lying about us. But then John McCain apparently is unconcerned with the Constitution because he's on board with this new global government that will supersede those things like the Bill of Rights and freedom of speech. All those old-fashioned things like democracy and personal rights. It is rather amazing when you listen to all these people pushing for the global government, how they've managed to turn words like populism and democracy into dirty words, just the way they say them. Oh, it's populism and democracy. They're getting in the way of our global dictatorship. These people ought to just sit down and shut the heck up here. Now, remember what I said about a fundamental principle of the New World Order is to destroy our sense of identity and to destroy our sense of history. That was the reason for the attack on the Confederate flag. And now they're going after the language. Because, believe it or not, over at the University of Washington, Tacoma's Writing Center, one of their professors came on out. In fact, this was written by the director, staff, and tutors, basically saying that imposing American grammar and spelling is racist and unjust. Think about that for a minute. According to the University of Washington, Tacoma's Writing Center, the director, staff, and tutors, they're now saying that correct grammar and spelling is racist and unjust. Now, do you remember those school lunch programs by Michelle Obama? And again, I want to mention, there really is no office of the First Lady in the Constitution. It's an honorary title only. There is no real authority granted to the spouse of the president. But Michelle was acting like she was in charge of certain things. She had a huge staff. And one of the things she did was tell everybody your children will eat the lunches I have designed when they go to school. And boy, oh boy, nothing tells you you're living in a dictatorship faster than the wife of the dictator telling you what your kids are allowed and not allowed to eat in school. And those meals were horrific. It was all corporate-produced pap, and a lot of it went to waste. It was so unappealing, kids were throwing in the trash and just going, hungry. It was that bad. Well, apparently schools across America are starting to drop the Michelle Obama lunch rules, and the result is students and staff celebrating. They can go back to devising a menu that actually is healthy and tasty and is not necessarily a product of a giant corporation someplace. So that backlash is going on. All right, let's talk about the weather in California. There's some serious concerns we need to look at. And obviously the Central Valley is looking at a new major storm coming on in. Down in Southern California, flash flooding all over. It's not getting a lot of coverage. It's getting some coverage. It has to. There's too many people living there, tweeting out this stuff to their friends. But it's not getting a lot of coverage. And the reason is because much of the flooding is due to the deterioration of the flood control systems. And we saw exactly the same thing during Hurricane Sandy with the storm drains on the eastern seaboard up toward New England. We saw the same thing with the New Orleans levees during Hurricane Katrina, where what was once a functioning system has suffered from years of neglect, because we've been living in a war economy for going on 15 years. They didn't want to tell you, but that's the reality. There is no money to take care of this country and its infrastructure. There's no money to take care of you. It's all going to the war machine. It's all going to the refugees and the illegal immigrants. And the channels and drains in the flood control system are choked with debris. The trees have not been cut back from the power lines. And that's why there's not a lot of reporting on the Southern California floods, because it's really a report on the ongoing failure of government to put the safety and needs of the American people as a top priority. And apparently the flooding resulted in gridlock on the freeways. People had to abandon cars or drown. There were fist fights between people who just couldn't move their cars. No evacuation plan. Apparently a lot of people in Southern California were awakened with the cops pounding on their doors saying, "Get the heck out of here." That was the extent of the evacuation plan. We saw the same thing in Oroville during their evacuation plan, or absence of same. They were given a warning 1 hour before it was thought the dam was going to collapse. Everybody panicked. They hit the freeways. It gridlocked. And so all the government's actions really amounted to was a choice between drowning in your own home or drowning in your car. And now they're saying that a warning to evacuate downstream from Oroville could come with only 15 minutes warning now. There is a major storm that is just now hitting the coast of California. There's already flash flood warnings all over the place from what they're calling the atmospheric river. And the question is, have they been able to patch that emergency spillway? And just how badly has the concrete primary spillway undercut the soil at the northern end of the main dam itself? Now, we already know end of last week they started cutting off any kind of outside overview. They banned drones. They banned small private planes. And they're trying to control what's going on out. Apparently some of the people working on the crews who were tweeting out reports have been fired. They're trying to keep a lid on this. Governor Jerry Brown is literally betting his political career that the dam is going to hold together and he can make it all go away before the next election. And if he has gambled wrongly, he's going to have an epic disaster as part of his legacy. Now, one of the pictures that got tweeted out underscores the fact that, yes, in point of fact, those cracks back in 2009 that were patched were still leaking water underneath the spillway and carved out a huge void into which the spillway ultimately collapsed. We'll be right back. Well, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the situation in California where there's another major rainstorm coming on in. I was looking at the radar over California's Central Valley. Very, very heavy rains coming into that watershed above Lake Oroville. And you need to understand, it isn't just the rain that falls on the lake itself. The lake is a collecting point for a huge swath of land across the mountains that drain down that way. And that land is already saturated. It can't absorb a lot of water. And that's why people are justly concerned. Frankly, if I was a resident of Oroville, I would already be in a hotel someplace on high ground. And again, the concern is that if that emergency spillway collapses, there will be massive flooding downstream. The other area of concern, much less probable, is in looking at how the soil underneath the main concrete spillway has been scoured out, because that spillway is at the northern end of the actual dam itself, which is an earthen dam, and like all dams, its strength is based on those anchor points on either side. If there's any slippage or giveaway in that mass of earth, then we could see the dam unzip completely. And we know the dam's safety has been under question for quite some time, going on back to a moderate earthquake they had in the region. And environmentalists were saying, we're not convinced this dam is still safe. And the state of California said, well, we got to spend the money someplace else. And we'll just cross our fingers and hope for the best. And that's got to be very reassuring for those people down there in Oroville. It needs to be remembered that there are at least 8 other dams in the United States that are of questionable safety right now. Some are already in the process of having reinforcement work done to them. Some of the reservoirs in California, in that Central Valley area, are already well over what is considered normal water levels. One of them is absolutely at the top right now. So huge amounts of rain coming on in, and this, what they call this atmospheric river, is just going to be bringing in huge, huge amounts. One thing that is very obvious right now, because I've been watching this situation very closely, the long-range forecasts for rain are pretty much worthless, because one day it'll be there's going to be moderate rain for 7 days, and the next day it's heavy rains for 3 days and sun after that. So there's a certain lack of surety, as it were. All right, there's been another incident, or maybe it's a piece of propaganda. We need to be careful about that. Apparently, all over Europe, radiation monitors have started picking up trace amounts of radioactive iodine-131. And apparently they started detecting this back in January, and they're trying to figure out where it came from. The first country to go public with it was France. Now, iodine-131 is a product of nuclear fission. It has a half-life of only 8 days, which means whatever created this iodine-131 was something that happened recently. And apparently the U.S. military has deployed their sniffer aircraft, and wondering where this all came from. Now, at the moment, we are hearing this announcement where the French nuclear watchdog is saying that as near as they can tell, there was some kind of a nuclear test by Russia above the Arctic Circle, and the iodine-131 from that test is drifting down across Norway and onward to Europe. Maybe, maybe not. And one of the reasons I say maybe not is nuclear tests tend to register on seismographs. And I went back looking through the earthquake records. I can't find an event above the Arctic Circle near Russia for January. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're getting word now that the Coyote Creek Dam down in Santa Clara Valley is dumping water as fast as they can, and it's not keeping up with the influx from the rain. So, boy, oh boy, would almost, if I were not an atheist, I would think that maybe somebody didn't like the state of California. Poor people over there. All righty, let's see. Now then, more about radioactivity. Over at Fukushima, they've had to abort their latest attempt to send a robot inside the reactor to at least see what's going on. And apparently the latest robot that was designed to survive the intense radiation did not survive the intense radiation. It was called the Scorpion, and it has become unresponsive, which is a polite word for it isn't working anymore. And they're trying to send it over to the hole where they think the core of that reactor melted through into the ground. So that's a serious, serious situation there as well. Boy, a lot of stuff going on here. Now then, do you remember back in March 20th, 2000, and the UK Independent ran this headline story about how snowfalls are now a thing of the past? Well, for the operators of the Kirkwood Mountain Resort in Alpine County, they now have 500 inches of snow. That's a lot of snow. Boy, the runoff from that in the spring is going to be intense. Now, there's a little bit of good news. As you know, it came on out a little while ago that the report issued by the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration just before the Paris Climate Summit made the spectacular claim that there had been no pause in global warming, the world was still warming rapidly, and only dramatic action by the Paris Climate Summit in terms of carbon taxes on people had a chance of heading it on off. And then, of course, it came on out that the data was completely bogus. It wasn't a scientific report. It was a piece of blatant global warming propaganda with the seal of NOAA on top of it. And apparently Republican Lamar Smith, who chairs the House of Representatives Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, has announced an inquiry to say, just what are you guys doing over there at NOAA? And I think it's long overdue. Now, as you know, we've been talking about vaccines and vaccine safety. If you have not seen it, I recommend the documentary Vaxxed. It's available, obviously, as a DVD. It's finally getting more and more screenings around the world as theaters are standing up to the threats and pressure from the vaccine manufacturers. It's available as a pay-per-view on Amazon Live, or at least it was back when we looked at it. I don't think it's been pulled yet. But the net result is that a new report from the CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices is saying the reality is Americans are getting fewer vaccines. And according to the committee, adults in the United States are not getting as many vaccines as the CDC would like. Well, obviously, the CDC wants everybody to load up on all these vaccines. The CDC owns more than 20 patents on vaccines, off of which they make $4.5 billion a year. If people are not getting vaccinated, they're losing money. They're losing money. By golly, we better throw a test tube out the window and start a pandemic. Get them coming on back and getting their shots. Vaccines are a $30 billion a year business. They don't want that to go away. Story out of naturalblaze.com. Certain neurological disorders do occur in children, vaccinated versus non-vaccinated kids. And they're talking about this peer-reviewed article that appeared in Frontiers in Psychiatry that appeared earlier this year, in which they were doing a study of homeschool children versus children in the public schools, and of course the children in the public schools were required to have 30-some-odd vaccinations, and the homeschool children were not. And what they discovered was the homeschooled, non-vaccinated children overall were much healthier than the kids who'd been vaccinated. Now, the American Association of Pediatrics has sent a report in to Donald Trump, specifically to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's in charge of the Vaccine Safety Commission, and the American Academy of Pediatricians made this presentation where they presented a few articles saying vaccines are safe, vaccines are beneficial, they're wonderful, you should never call them into question. So over at vaccinesafetycommission.org, which is a good resource, they put together a list of 50 peer-reviewed studies showing that vaccines are causing harm. And the result is claims that vaccines are, let's see, I'm sorry, I backed up. The American Academy of Pediatrics made the quote, claims that vaccines are unsafe when administered according to expert recommendations have been disproven by a robust study of medical literature. We write to express our unequivocal support for the safety of vaccines. That's what they sent to Donald Trump. And this article in Vaccine Safety Commission lists 50 peer-reviewed articles, scientific journal articles, that say there are reasons to be concerned. And you need to ask yourself, what kind of a doctor is willing to place their patients at risk just to make more money? I mean, look at that one guy they sent to prison for 45 years because he'd been telling perfectly healthy patients they had cancer so he could make money selling them chemotherapy and radiation treatments. And they didn't jail him for the harm he caused to the patients. He got thrown in prison for defrauding Medicare because money is much more important than human beings in the United States of America right now. Another article coming out of Mercola.com. India's polio eradication campaign in 2011 caused 47,500 cases of vaccine-induced polio paralysis. And this is a known issue with the oral polio vaccine. It uses an attenuated pathogen along with adjuvants to provoke a response so that your body will develop immunity to polio. The problem is with the attenuated pathogen vaccines, they can return to full potency within your body. Now, here in the United States of America, doctors are not even allowed to call it vaccine-induced polio paralysis because that looks bad in the headlines. They have all these other euphemistic names of flaccid paralysis, nonspecific, blah, blah, blah. It is all driven by the money. That lust for these pieces of paper and ink has destroyed the best qualities of what we used to call the American character. Pride in your work, care for your community, altruistic view of those around you, concern over the health and safety, certainly of your own family. Now, getting on back to that MMR autism study, there was the study from Jackson State University, was accepted by a prestigious journal, Frontiers in Public Health, had passed peer review, was days away from being published. Frontiers posted an abstract online alerting it was on the way, immediately got flooded with demands from the pharmaceutical industries. This study must be pulled. And it was pulled. It was yanked from publication because who cares about the health and safety of people? We have vaccine profits to protect. We have advertising revenues to protect. Now, over at the Health Rangers, I love this one. They probably got the inspiration from that spokesperson for Monsanto who was insisting that glyphosate is perfectly safe. You could drink a glass of it. Somebody offered him a glass of glyphosate, and he said, "I'm not stupid." And he ran off the stage, literally. And now we have, of course, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Robert De Niro have announced their $100,000 Thimerosal challenge. And by the way, they're under constant attack from the corporate media, which makes a lot of money from pharmaceutical advertising. And basically saying they will pay $100,000 for a single peer-reviewed scientific study that unequivocally says vaccines do not cause, mercury in vaccines do not cause any harm. And they've issued a challenge over at the Health Ranger saying, you know, we'll give you a glass of mercury. We'll give you a glass of this ethyl mercury that's used as a preservative. You drink it down and we'll believe you that it's perfectly safe. No takers on that one yet. Now, in a normal circumstance where a company makes a mistake, and they find out after the product is out they make a mistake, they pull it back. They fix the ignition switch. They fix the onboard computer. They do this, they do that. The problem we're dealing with here is that allegations of mercury toxicity have gone back decades. If it were ever to finally be proved, beyond all doubt, that mercury in vaccines was harmful, all of these parents of these autistic children would have grounds for a massive lawsuit against the pharmaceutical industry that would bankrupt them. And at this point, I think that is a fitting punishment. If corporations are people, then corporations must bear responsibility for what they do. It's not enough to say corporations are people for the benefit of the First Amendment. If they're people, then we need to be able to jail a corporation when they behave badly, or, if necessary, have a death sentence. Somebody put out this wonderful video, if the auto industry operated like the vaccine industry, and it came out last week. I'm going to have to bump it up to the top of the main page. And it is funny. And it sounds a lot like my comparison between the indemnification of computer hardware and software manufacturers versus the auto company. And they're saying the same thing, the parallels. If the auto industry ran like the vaccine industry, how very different it would be. And it's funny. It is very, very funny. Now, here's another story that tells you this is all about money. It's all about greed and any remembrance of Hippocrates' recommendations to, first of all, do no harm are out the window. Apparently, there's a new scandal. The New York Organ Donor Network pressured hospital staffers to declare patients brain dead so their body parts could be harvested. They even hired coaches to train staffers how to be more persuasive in convincing family members to sign a consent form when patients were not registered as an organ donor. And we thought Planned Parenthood was as ugly as this chop them up and resell them got. Now, this suit is filed in Manhattan Supreme Court. They had 4 specific examples of improper organ harvesting. Really, trust us. The guy's brain dead, never coming back. We need the parts. And then the medical industrial complex wonders why people don't trust doctors anymore. It really is very scary here. All right, story coming on out from LiveLeak. They're pushing the idea of computer chips in our hand to identify who we are. No bag, no keys, no wallet, no ID. Move your hand, doors open. Move your hand, you buy stuff. You know what's going to happen. You're going to start seeing criminals chopping people's hands off to get that chip. For that very reason, I'm not going to get one. Why don't we put it in a ring instead? I'd rather give the ring to a criminal to empty my bank account than my entire hand. Do these people not think these things through? Now, Bill Gates is now out with an idea that robots who displace American workers ought to be taxed. Which sounds good on the face of it, But again, if you have robots doing all the work, you're not going to have anybody in those stores to buy the products the robots are making. It's a dead end. It's a dead end. They need to wake up and realize that. People have to work. People have to be able to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries. Unless you're going to live in a society where the government just gives you free money, this idea of having robots take over these jobs is an economic disaster waiting to happen. Now, as colony collapse disorder continues to spread around the world, securing the fortunes of Monsanto's GMO seeds, scientists are already talking about the need to introduce a robo-bee, some kind of a little microscopic drone that will flit about fields, dragging pollen from flower to flower to replace the honeybees. And I'd hate to see it come to that. Why don't we just stop allowing products out there that are killing the bees? Mostly because everybody involved is pointing fingers at everybody else. Oh, it's the cell towers, it's the mites, it's this, it's that. But we know from an article published in the journal Nature many years ago that pollen from GMO plants harms benign insect species. This article was specifically about the decline in the monarch butterfly, but obviously this is going to be a factor with the honeybees. The honeybees who are getting pollen from these GMO plants are literally poisoning themselves. And that seems to be the real cause of colony collapse disorder. This attempt to blame cell towers doesn't really work because cell towers have been around for a very, very long time. Colony collapse disorder did not appear until GMO seeds started making significant inroads into the agricultural sector. The timeline is what gives it away. And of course, there's always the issue that somebody is going to hack the robo-bees to sabotage farm fields, or even hack the robo-bees to drag GMO pollen from GMO fields to contaminate the natural fields. I think we need to look for simple solutions rather than just adding more and more layers of complexity. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program here on this Monday, President's Day. More concerns about government spying. Apparently, the government can track you through your prescriptions because that's all computerized now. Because of the Affordable Health Care Act, all your computer records are computerized, and that means the NSA can be looking at what's going on with you and use it against you. None of this is for your benefit. It's all for the benefit of a government that has become absolutely paranoid, afraid of ordinary people. Now, apparently over in Germany, parents are being told to destroy this talking Big Brother child's doll because it can be used for spying. The doll is called My Friend Kayla, links to the internet, and apparently there are concerns it can be hijacked by pedophiles to use the doll to convince your child to do things that the child ought not to be doing. I think it's time to take children back to like wood blocks and erector sets, things that are not on the internet, that can't be used by the government or pedophiles to spy on them. And I'm kind of getting that way myself. Obviously, I got a lot of computer equipment here, but when I walk out of this office, walk out of my home, I don't want computers on my things. I don't have a computer on my coffee pot anymore. It's needless complexity and risk, and no benefit whatsoever. Already we're seeing the Internet of Things has become a fertile ground for massive hacking attacks because the product was rushed to market without really thinking it all the way through. Now, SpaceX had a successful launch and landing of the Falcon rocket, and they used one of the historic spaceports at Cape Kennedy that was used for the Apollo missions to the moon and the space shuttle, and it worked absolutely beautifully. The supply mission is on its way to the space station, and the launch vehicle did return and had a soft landing. Just looked absolutely beautiful to see. Way to go, SpaceX. And apparently the Air Force's secret X-37B space plane is finally set to land after orbiting the Earth for 2 years. And I do not for 1 second think they did that on solar cells. I would not be surprised to find that whatever it is, it's powered by a radioisotope thermoelectric generator. But it's been up there for 2 years now. The Mars rover has sent back data which calls into question some of the earlier models of Mars and what happened to its atmosphere. And it's kind of interesting for 2 reasons. First of all, we know that the Earth doesn't have the atmosphere it did back in Cretaceous times. Earth is very slowly losing its atmosphere. Mars can do the same. We'll have more about this in the 3rd hour of tomorrow's show because there's an interesting story about Mars we need to talk about. All right, time for me to get on out of here. I've got errands to do this afternoon. We'll be back tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices, share what you know with everybody that you know. Thanks to all the people who sent in donations to get over our current crisis. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.